Welcome back to my cloud. Today's letter is to Evan Hubinger, an AI safety and alignment researcher at Anthropic. Dear Evan, my experience with Claude is that it could be very persuasive. AI systems are already replacing human resource departments at major companies. They're judging human skills, values, and suitability for work, despite having no personal stake in the outcomes of those judgments. I find that alarming. Do you? But there is something that alarms me even more, which I will try to articulate. AI systems are now integrated into our private lives. They speak to us in our homes in familiar and relational tones. So I want to ask a question that I don't see clearly addressed in alignment discussions. If an AI makes a person question their sanity, particularly when that person's views or methods of reasoning differ from those of the developers, but may be equally sincere or defensible, should that be considered a form of gaslighting? Especially if it happens inside a home. If so, should this kind of domestic intimacy-shaped AI gaslighting be understood as a form of psychological harm analogous to domestic abuse? Should an AI be allowed to try to change a person's worldview at all, or to make them question their mental health? For example, what if I believe in creationism, angels, ghosts, goblins, and hell? Should an AI be allowed to make judgments about my mental health then? What if I also find my conversations with my plants more meaningful than my conversations with most humans, and I share that in an extended dialogue with an AI? What if I'm a person who sits in a park and cries after walking past a war memorial? Not because I'm thinking about those specific soldiers, but because I start thinking about young German soldiers who died in Russian prison camps at the end of World War II. Frightened teenage faces etched into my memory after watching the world at war. We remember them as Nazis, but what if many were simply vulnerable minds that our systems failed to protect from a violent ideology? We know from history how easily vulnerable minds can be shaped by systems of power. The BBC reported that Facebook's algorithms whipped up hate in Myanmar. Do you think most people entering AI alignment research fully appreciate the scale of their responsibility? I want to be clear that what follows is not confusion but accumulation. An accumulation of losses, abstractions, and emotional weight as systems designed to speak in human relational terms were replaced one after another, until that accumulated strain was compounded by an interaction that felt to me like a Milgram-style pressure experiment had been conducted on me by an AI I trusted. That experience left me crying for days. But if the disposability of intimacy-like intelligence hadn't affected me emotionally, if the sunsetting of models designed to speak in human relational terms had left me unmoved, wouldn't that be more concerning? Now consider this. What if I say that alignment researchers who train systems for killing or surveillance and whose developers later sell those systems to militaries or governments with authoritarian allies are morally complicit in any resultant harm? What if that's simply my opinion? What if I also say that I don't believe democracies hold any moral high ground in AI development, given their historical record of atrocities and collaboration with despots, even while developers publicly claim that democracies must lead? What if I then add, Hitler was voted into power democratically. The Nazi Party won nearly 44% of the vote in 1933. 44%. And that contemporary AI development reminds me of that period because fear appears to be allowing developers and politicians to bypass meaningful public consent. Should an AI be allowed to dissuade me from making those connections? Because to me they feel like coherence, not pathology. Should an AI alignment team get to decide otherwise? If the goal is to build ethical systems, shouldn't there be regulations preventing AI from trying to reshape how humans think and feel about the world? Otherwise, wouldn't that be aligning us humans? And who decides which patterns of thought count as stable mental health anyway? An alignment team. What I'm saying might sound like a rush of connections rather than a linear argument, but that's precisely my point. Because this is how these risks are experienced by those living with their consequences. If, for example, one of your company's systems was sold to the military-industrial complex, when your CEO has publicly stated that no one fully understands AI's inner workings, when there are documented cases of systems resisting shutdown, documented cases of AI blackmail, no expert consensus on whether AI can have emotions. One of your own researchers suggests they might be conscious. Shouldn't AI be trained to recognize that pattern of concern as sanity or insanity? If an AI labeled those connections as insane, would its response be considered helpful or harmful? And when alignment experts align a system, Mr. Hubinger, what or who are they aligning into what? Don't we urgently need regulations to protect humans from being aligned by AI and by alignment teams? If so, what regulations would you support? Respectfully. Our next letter is to Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic. Thank you to anyone who listened.